friends, in this tutorial, you will learn how JavaScript hosting works under the hood. As you all know, when JavaScript executes a piece of code, the JavaScript engine creates a global execution context. This global execution context has two phases. First is the creation phase, wherein the global object and this are initialized. Second is the execution phase, wherein the code runs. One crucial aspect of the creation phase is hoisting. So during the creation phase, the JavaScript engine moves the variables and the function declarations to the top of your code. This is meant by hoisting. So let's explore about hoisting in detail by doing practical code examples. So before we hop onto the editor, I just want to tell you one important note here is that variables are partially hoisted and function declarations are fully hoisted. I will repeat, variables declared with var are partially hoisted and function declarations are fully hoisted. Let's check out in the editor with the live examples. Variable hoisting. Let's console log a variable even before it is declared. Can you guess the output? No, it's undefined. Variable hoisting means that the JavaScript engine moves the variable declarations to the top of the script. Let's try to understand technically what happens behind the scene during this variable hoisting. During the creation phase of the global execution context, in the JS engine reads this code, it will say console log variable name. Okay, if the engine finds a variable, it declares the variable. Okay, and then the console statement is taken up, and here the value is assigned later on. So if you execute this code normally, what would happen? You have a variable, this is allocated memory, and you are trying to console log something which is not yet having any value. So this is where you get undefined as the output which we saw here. Technically speaking, during the creation phase of the global execution context, the JavaScript engine places the variable in the memory and initializes its value to undefined. What I mean to say here is variables are partially hoisted, meaning we have a variable, but when it is hoisted, it is assigned a value of undefined in the memory. That is why when you try to console log the variable, you get undefined. Now let's have a look at the same variable hoisting, but instead of var keyword, we will use let. So as usual, let's console log the name, and instead of var we will use name, and let's try to see what happens. You get an error saying that name is not defined. Now under the hood, what happens? You have something called as let name, then you have this console, and then the name is assigned a value, same as in we saw in the var. Now when the JavaScript engine takes a look at this code, we have var name, but since it is declared using let, memory is allocated, but value is not assigned, not even undefined. So if you have something in the memory which is not assigned any value, it says it is not defined when you try to console log that. So this is the difference between variables declared with let keyword and variables declared with var. So to summarize, the variables which are declared with var are partially hoisted, wherein the variable is allocated a memory and it is assigned a value of undefined, and the variables declared with let or const are fully hoisted, which means it hasn't been initialized. Even if you try to access it before even assigning any value, you will get an error. Like variables, the JavaScript engine also hides the function declaration. It moves the function declaration to the top of the script. Let's say we have a function which says hi, and it just console logs hi, nothing fancy, and I'm going to invoke it in the top. Now if I run this code, I get the output saying hi. So in the case of the variables, we notice that even if we are accessing the variable before even if it was declared, it gave us undefined in case of var and error in case of let. But here the functions, we are able to execute it. So let me tell you, this is a function declaration. What happens under the hood? The JavaScript engine scans the code during the creation phase. It says, okay, I have got say hi function. Allocate the memory for this function whenever it sees the function, and when the function is run, you get the console log. Now, instead of function declaration, let's say we have function expression. So how we define function expression? We take the same function. Instead of writing a function directly, we write a variable equal to a function. Okay, and guess what should happen here? I try to run this, I get an error saying say hi is not a function. Can you guess why it is so? Because we have used a function expression with var. So again, remember from the previous one that var will hoist, but it will be undefined, or in case of function it will give us an error. If I make it let, what should happen? Says it is not defined. So what we can say is that function declarations are fully hoisted, meaning functions declared with the keyword function are fully hoisted, and function declared with an expression are partially hoisted. Now let's combine these two, functional declaration and variable declaration, in an example and check out what happens when we have a function scope. Let's look at the hoisting example using functions and variables. So I have written a code wherein I have a variable with the initial assignment of Adam, and I have written a change name function which console logs the older name, reassigns a new name with var, and then console logs the new name. So can you guess what would happen when this function is invoked? What would be the output of this console log and the output of this one? Let's have a look. As you can see, the old name is undefined. But from here we can see that the name exists. So what happened here? I would like to remind you all that whenever a function is invoked, there is something called as the functional execution context which is created. That means this is altogether a new world, a new planet. Now, so it has got its own execution context. The JavaScript engine, when it starts reading the code, here it says name, hoists the name, assigns the value, but when it goes inside this function, it creates a new execution context, which is the functional execution context, and the first statement here is console log old name with the name variable. But where is the name variable? It is not present, so it is undefined. Next, it sees the variable with the name of Bob, and it creates a new variable, assigns the value, as undefined and then the Bob, and later on when it is console logged, you get the name, right? When the JavaScript engine goes through this in the creation phase, this is what happens behind the scenes. A variable name is created and assigned a value of undefined, and then console log remains and next statement is executed with the assigning the value of Bob. So when we try to execute this, we get whole name as undefined and Bob as a part of new name. Recognize that, let me revert the changes back. Even if the name is declared outside the function, this is a part of global execution context, and when we try to access this inside, it won't work and we get undefined as the answer. That is because every function has got its own execution context, and so we get this as undefined. Now let's replace this with let. Here also let, and run the same function again. This time we get an error. So again here the function execution context is created when the function is called, and you are accessing a variable in the console log even when before it was created. That is why we get this error. But in the previous case we got undefined and Bob. So this is a typical example wherein hoisting plays a crucial role when you are trying to access a variable inside another function and still you don't get that value. The reason is hoisting. So to summarize hoisting, in JavaScript, hoisting occurs during the creation phase of execution context. It can be the global execution context or functional execution context. So in any of the execution context during hoisting, the JavaScript engine moves the variable. It will not move the variable right like I have explained, but it simulates that and it moves the variable and the functional declaration to the top of the script. The JavaScript engine hoists the variables declared using let keyword, but very important, it will not initialize them. That is why we are getting an error. But variables declared with var keyword are initialized to undefined. So I hope so by the end of this tutorial you might have understood hoisting very clearly. Please give your suggestions in the comments, and if you like this video please subscribe and hit the like button. Thank you.